The lamp had burned down low enough that the flame made a soft clicking sound inside the glass. I remember that sound better than anything else from our wedding night. Not the supper, not the hymns, not even the hands that shook mine all afternoon. Just that little flame, and my wife sitting on the edge of the bed with both hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone pale. Then she looked at me and said, "Jonas, no." There are words a man expects to hear on his wedding day. Congratulations, God bless your home, take care of her, be patient with one another. No one had prepared me for that one word, or perhaps they had prepared me badly. My name is Jonas. I am a husband, a father, and the head of a household in an old order Amish community. I tell these stories because there are parts of our life that outsiders rarely see, and parts we ourselves do not always know how to speak about. If you have ever had to choose between what you were taught and what you knew in your heart was right, you may understand this story better than you expect. I had been married for less than 12 hours. That morning, before sunrise, I stood beside the washstand in my father's house and tried to tie my black shoes with hands that would not keep still. The room smelled of cold iron from the stove, soap, and the coffee my mother had started downstairs. My younger brothers were sleeping in the room beside mine, though I knew at least one of them was awake and pretending otherwise. My father came in without knocking. He wore his work trousers and suspenders as if it were any other morning, but his beard had been combed more carefully than usual. He watched me tie the same lace twice. "You know what is expected of you," he said. I nodded. That was the full conversation. He did not say anything cruel. My father was not a cruel man. He had worked hard every day of his life, kept food on our table, and taught me to finish what I began. But like many men of his generation, he believed silence was a form of instruction. A son was expected to understand the rest. In the weeks before the wedding, married men had made small remarks around me. Nothing direct. A grin while harnessing a horse, a hand on my shoulder after church. One man told me that a wife might be shy at first, but a husband had to lead. Another said the beginning of marriage was when a woman learned to trust her husband's certainty. I was 37 years old, not a boy. I had worked timber in winter, stood beside a sick child through the night, buried my mother's brother, and signed my name to the deed of a farm that still carried debt. I thought I understood responsibility, but I had never been a husband. My wife, Anna, and I had known each other for years. We had spoken after singings, worked at the same frolics, and sat across from one another at enough family meals that I knew she disliked overcooked beans and always saved the crust of her pie for last. Our courtship had been private and careful. We did not speak openly about the wedding night. That was not how we had been raised. The wedding lasted most of the day. There were nearly 200 people moving through the house and barn. The air was thick with the smell of roasted chicken, bread, coffee, damp wool, and kerosene. Children ran between benches. Women carried dishes until their faces shone with heat. Men laughed louder than they needed to. Anna smiled through all of it. But by evening, when the last wagon wheels had faded down the lane, I could see that her smile had become something she was holding in place. Our room was at the back of the small farmhouse we had prepared. The bedstead was oak. The quilt had been made by her mother and sisters, dark blue with small white squares. A pitcher of water stood on the washstand beside 2 cups. Someone had placed a sprig of dried lavender near the lamp. I closed the door. Anna sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I thought of my father's words, "You know what is expected of you." I stepped toward her. That was when she said no. Not loudly, not angrily. She said it like someone setting down a heavy bucket before the handle cut deeper into her hand. I stopped. She kept looking at the floor. My first feeling was not kindness. I wish I could tell you it was. My first feeling was embarrassment, then confusion, then something close to anger, though not exactly at her. I was angry at the silence that had brought us into that room without giving either of us the words we needed. I asked, Are you afraid of me?" She shook her head, but tears had already gathered along her lower eyelids. "I am afraid of tonight," she said. There is a difference between those two things. I did not understand it immediately. I sat in the wooden chair near the wall. The chair creaked under me, and for several seconds that was the only sound in the room. Part of me wanted to say that we were married now. Part of me wanted to repeat what other men had told me, that a husband must lead, that nervousness was natural, that certainty would calm her. Those thoughts came quickly because they had been handed to me long before I entered that room. But another thought came more slowly. She was my wife, not my duty, not my proof of manhood, not a door I had earned the right to open. She was Anna, the woman who had carried broth to my house when my youngest had fever, the woman who remembered that my left knee hurt in cold weather and quietly moved a stool closer to the stove for me, the woman who had trusted me enough to leave her father's home and build a life beside mine. I looked at her hands. She was twisting the edge of her apron between two fingers. So I said, "Then tonight will be only tonight." She looked up. I told her she could have the bed. I would sleep in the chair or on the floor. She said I would wake with my back bent like an old gate hinge. That was the first time she almost smiled. I took the spare blanket from the chest and laid it beside the stove in the front room. Before I left, I turned the lamp lower. At the door, she said my name. I looked back. "Are you angry?" I thought carefully before I answered. "I am disappointed in what I expected," I said. "Not in you." That was the truest answer I had. I slept badly. The floorboards were hard and the fire went out around 2 in the morning. I woke with one shoulder numb and the taste of cold ash in the air. Before dawn, I heard Anna moving in the kitchen. When I entered, she had already started coffee. Her eyes were swollen from crying, though she had washed her face. We ate bread with apple butter at the table. The clock ticked between us. Finally, she told me the truth. An older cousin had spoken to her before the wedding. The cousin had not meant to frighten her, but she had described marriage as something a woman endured until she became accustomed to it. She told Anna that a good wife did not make difficulty for her husband. Anna had carried those words for 3 weeks without telling anyone. I felt anger then, clear anger, not because Anna had refused me, because 2 adults had entered a marriage carrying fear and expectation that no one had taught us how to examine. I asked her what she needed. She said, "Time to believe I can speak and still be safe with you." That sentence changed my marriage. Trust did not arrive the next morning like sunlight through a window. It came slowly. We spoke more honestly than either of us had ever spoken before. Some conversations lasted 10 minutes. Some lasted until the lamp oil was nearly gone. There were moments when I felt clumsy and ashamed of how little I understood. There were moments when Anna apologized for feelings that required no apology. I learned that patience is not the absence of desire. It is the decision that another person's peace matters more than the relief of your own impatience. I also learned that leadership inside a marriage is not proven by getting your way. A week after the wedding, my father came to help repair a sagging section of fence. We worked for 2 hours in wet ground, setting cedar posts while clouds gathered over the fields. He asked without looking at me whether married life suited me. I said, "It is teaching me more than I expected." He pressed soil around a post with the heel of his boot. Then I told him plainly that a husband's authority did not mean his wife's voice disappeared. My father was quiet for a long time. At last he said, "Then be a better husband than I knew how to explain." That was all. It was enough. Anna and I have been married many years now. We have children who know when we disagree, because a house cannot hide every hard conversation. But they also know that no is a complete word in our home. They know that affection is never owed. They know that apologies are not a loss of authority. There are people who may hear this story and think I am making too much of one night. But a marriage is often shaped by small moments when no one else is watching. A closed door, a lowered voice, a choice made before anger has time to dress itself as principle. On our wedding night, I believed I had been taught what a husband was supposed to do. What I had actually been taught was a collection of expectations, half spoken by men who had inherited them from other men. Some of those expectations carried wisdom, others carried silence. It became my responsibility to know the difference. I did not lose anything by stopping. I did not become less of a husband. That night was the first time I truly acted like one. What I understand now is simple. A marriage does not become strong because one person leads and the other follows without question. It becomes strong when both people can speak the truth without fear of punishment, shame, or abandonment. A husband may be called to carry responsibility. He may be called to make hard decisions, provide for his household, and stand steady when others are frightened. But none of that gives him ownership over another person. Love without choice is not trust, and authority without gentleness becomes something no faithful man should want inside his home. When Anna said no, she was not rejecting our marriage. She was asking whether our marriage would be a place where her voice mattered. I am grateful I answered correctly, even though I did not yet have the words to explain why. If you value honest stories about marriage, faith, work, and family life from inside the Amish community, you are welcome to subscribe. And I would like to ask you something in the comments. Were you ever taught an expectation that you later had to examine for yourself? Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stop, listen, and choose differently.